Hello everyone, welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. This is chapter 17. This one is honoring the dead and those who mourn. But like our latest tradition, as always, let us start with saying Psalms 117, 2 verses, that's it, that's the whole Psalms. We're going to say it in Hebrew. We're going to shake the heavens, okay? All right. Hallelu et Adonai, kol goim, shabechuhu, kol ha'umim, ki gavar, aleinu chasdo, ve'emet Adonai, le'olam, hallelujah. Thank you for your participation. Okay, so let's get into it. Concerning the one who tenders the service of loving kindness to mourners. Whence do we learn of the service of loving kindness to mourners? From the omnipresent, Ribono Shel Olam, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who alone showed loving kindness to Moses, his servant, and buried him with his own hand. Now, if you haven't seen the teaching that I did on this yet, then please go to the one called This is the End. And there's an entire story of the last hour of Moses and what transpired. Amazing stuff, like what happened in the mountain, the part that we don't read. So it's from the, where's it from? It's from Midrash Rabbah. It's at the end. In any case, I go into it in great detail. Not to mention that I give the class in the actual synagogue that I grew up in, and I give you a little tour at the end over there. So again, it's called This is the End. You can look it up on the TOA channel. If this story had not been written in the Torah, it would be impossible to say it, as it is said in Deuteronomy 34:6. And he buried him in the valley, in the land of Moab, opposite Bet Peor, and no person knows the place of his burial until this day. Vaikvo oto begei haaretz. So in other words, if it was not written, you wouldn't believe that God personally did it, but actually that's what happened. It's God and 3 other angels. One of them disappears over there. It's very interesting. But anyway, go listen to it. Okay, all right, let's continue. Rabban Gamliel, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, said, not to Moses alone did he show loving kindness, but also to Aaron. Yes, we have read that it was Moses who prepared Aaron and Eleazar, his son. Remember, he put the garments on him to begin with, and then before he died, he took the garments off, and he gave them to Eleazar, his son. He took the garments, and he became the next high priest of Israel. But we're about to learn something new right now. For when they went up to Mount Hor, all the tribes of Israel were contending and saying, Moses and Eleazar have left Aaron on Mount Hor and have gone down by themselves. In other words, they left him there. Everybody knows. Efo nikvar Aaron behor hahar. It's also strange. It's not har ho, but hor hahar. Okay, fine. There was talk in the camp that they may have, taken him out, because it wasn't like he was dying beforehand. It was, again, Moses was he had his, he had all the energy as a young man. He didn't get old until it was his time to go. Same thing with Aaron, the high priest. It wasn't like, oh man, it's hard to get up today. No, we're just going. And now, okay, peace out. It's been an honor. It's been real. Thank you so much. You understand? So it's kind of strange what happened over there. Not to mention that Aaron was Israel's favorite person, as he was known as being the peacemaker. Israel did not believe that Aaron had passed, says our text. Why is it difficult for them to believe this? I asks. Because we have learned back in the Torah portion teaching in Parshat Chukat, when God sent the plague because Israel complained and doubted God. Moses told Aaron to grab incense and run out into the crowd, right? And then he stood between the living and the dead. You could check that out. I did a teaching on that one too. He stood out between the living and the dead. He was holding the incense over there. What had happened was that Aaron saw the angel of death, Vayatse Ketzef, Me'et Hashem. Ketzef is one of the 5 Malachei Chabalah. These are all how shall we say? These are all high commanders of the angel of death. Again, it's almost like they're all one and the same, just different aspects of them. So, okay, I'll continue what I wrote before I get ahead of my own self. So he came out, he saw the angel of death standing over there in the camp in the form of ketzif, wrath. That's another way of saying wrath. He then grabbed him by its waist and he said, all right, you've had enough fun, now you're coming with me. To which the angel replied, and he couldn't understand why this mortal is grabbing him and he can't go, right? To which the angel replied, I was sent by the Holy One, be he. Get off of me. To which Aaron replied, I have been sent by Moses, son of Amram. Remember him? And you know, oh yes, you know, because you met him when you were up there on Mount Sinai and God gave him the Torah. You know that he never says anything that does not come out from the mouth of the Holy One, blessed be he. So if I'm here, that means the latest command coming from God was that you're coming with me. And given the fact that I literally got a hold on you, dead or alive, you're coming with me, right? Okay. Incidentally, how did Moses know that incense was the remedy to stopping the plague, or at least subduing Ketzef in that point? Because it was Satan himself who gave this secret to Moses after he received the Torah. We also discussed that when Moses left Mount Sinai, when he left the presence of God, all the angels in existence stood there in awe, saying, okay, so this dude just received the blueprint of creation, and they gave him a gift from the Torah. In other words, they illuminated different parts of the Torah. It wasn't actually like, here, this, here's that. Every angel gave him something different, and it was Satan who gave him the incense. And that is what actually doesn't really take out Satan, but it subdues him. Okay, so in other words, he showed him this. That's how Moses knew. Okay, and since they didn't believe he could be dead, they refused to show him loving kindness, meaning they refused to mourn for Aaron. Right? If Aaron can subdue the angel of death, no way. Then the angel of death cannot beat Aaron. End of story. That's why they had a hard time believing this. As a result, what did the Holy One, blessed be he, do? He took Aaron's coffin and brought it about the camp of Israel, and all Israel saw Aaron's coffin flying and moving in the air. When we read verse 20-28 in Numbers, Moses then stripped Aaron of his garments and dressed Eleazar his son in them, and Aaron died there on the top of the mountain. Then Moses and Eleazar descended from the mountain. So first of all, while Moses was removing the garments from Aaron, God was simultaneously covering him with the clouds of glory. He wasn't just standing there in his birthday suit, okay? Again, there's a matter of tzniut, always, modesty. So these are the same clouds of glory that covered Israel in the merit of Aaron. And then we read the next verse. The whole congregation saw that Aaron had expired, and the entire house of Israel wept for Aaron for 30 days. So a question was asked this week. If you're listening, MD, by the way, love it. Thank you. Not done with it yet, but we'll get to it. Why is it 30 days from the time a person dies and you bury them till the time you put the tombstone over there? Why not before? The reason is because 30 days is, it's a time of rebirth. It's like, it's a new moon period. Okay, so now that period is done. Something new is over there. And why do you not write on the tombstone your name and just have it sit there? I mean, would you feel comfortable with your name on a tombstone sitting somewhere? Like, yep, that's going to be me. You don't do that. Just like you don't give a baby, in Judaism anyway, you don't give the baby's name until the Brit or the Britah. In other words, like, oh, this child, you're assuming that the child is going to be born fine. I mean, God willing, of course. But that's why we don't do things before the time, because we don't know what's going to come. So having your name on a tombstone it's kind of dark. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, you don't want to go there. That's why we don't do that. Okay, so let's continue. So they mourned Aaron for 30 days. Now, were all Israel up in the cave in the mountain with them? That would be impossible, right? Which is why this makes sense that all Israel saw the fact that he had indeed passed via his coffin, flying through the air for all Israel to see as one. It says, Kol ha'edah. Right? What do we say? Ha'edah, edah, edim. They were all witnesses. That means they were all together. There's there's what is it? That's am haaretz. There's the congregation, the keilah, and keilah is lehikahel, to gather the crowd, and then the highest is edah, witnesses. That means they're all there together, physically and mentally and spiritually together in the same place. That's why Vayru kol ha'edah, they all saw together. So kol ha'edah, witnessed. Ed comes from that, right? Ed, in fact, edah is Ed Hashem. Okay, and they wept and they mourned him for 30 days, paying him gmilut chasadim, loving kindness. Hesed. We should learn this word in Hebrew anyway. I'll every now and then say loving kindness, but it's called ligmol, to give back, chesed, kindness. Regarding Moses, only the men showed loving kindness to Moses, right? Everybody showed loving kindness to Aaron, but only the men showed loving kindness to Moses. As it said, and the sons of Israel wept for Moses. Bnei Israel, the sons of Israel specifically, Deuteronomy 34:8. But for Aaron, the men, the women, and the children showed him loving kindness. Now, how do we know that the women cried for Aaron as well? From the verse that we just read, Numbers 20:29. Vayir'u, and they saw kol ha'edah, ki gava Aharon, that Aaron, they witnessed that Aaron had died. Vayifku et Aharon 30 yom kol beit Israel. Beit Israel, bait. When you ask a person, let's say, for instance, you don't want to, it's improper to ask a fellow Jew, how's your wife doing? You understand? There are obviously ways to say it, but the way to say it is, echa bait, how's the house? You understand? So when we see Beit Israel, it alludes to the women. The most famous Orthodox girls' school in the world is called Beis Yaakov. My mom went there in Brooklyn way back when. So whenever we see Beit Israel, that refers to the women. Kol ha'edah is everybody as well. Okay, now, in other words, this is specific. They wanted to point this out. Now, since you have all paid attention in the last few classes when we discussed the incredible merit of Aaron and his personal involvement in the lives of all of Israel, the next part should warrant a nod from you. And feel free to think to yourself, yeah, I knew that, because you did. Okay, why did all of Israel lament over Aaron? You know this. That's right. Or think, yes. Exactly. In fact, we've been speaking about it. You know this, know these things. Because he was a lover and pursuer of peace. Rodef shalom. He was ohev shalom verodef shalom. And he would pass through all the camp of Israel. Listen to the high priest, the first high priest of Israel. He's the only one, by the way, who could go into the Holy of Holies whenever he wanted. After him, you can only go on Yom Kippur once a year, high priest. Aaron, free pass. Okay. He had to go through the entire cleansing ritual. He couldn't just, stroll in there, but when it was needed. He would pass through all the camp of Israel every single day. This is what was written in the text. Every single day, and made peace between man and his wife, and between man and his fellow man, which is why all of Israel have shown him loving kindness. Wow. Every day. Every day. He loved peace where it was at, and he would pursue peace where it wasn't. Love that stuff. Okay, so according to this verse, this is not Aaron's burial place. Rather, in Mosra, where Aaron died and was buried, and the scripture speaks of it as if he died and was buried there. Okay, wait, what did I just read? Because I just read from Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. Didn't we just say that Aaron died in Hol Hahal? Now you're talking about Mosra? What's going on here? There's a question as to where Aaron was buried. Is there? We can read in Numbers 20:25. Take Aaron and Eleazar his son and ascend Mount Hor, right? Strip Aaron of his garments and dress Eleazar his son, with them. Then Aaron shall be gathered to his people and die there. So very specifically says, Moses did as the Lord commanded him. They ascended Mount Hor in the presence of the entire congregation. Very clearly does it state where Aaron died and was buried. But now let's turn to Deuteronomy 10:6. What does it say? The children of Israel journeyed from the wells of Bnei Yakan to Mosera. There Aaron died, and there he was buried, and Eleazar his son served as Kohen in his stead. That's not right, is it? If so, then how could Numbers and Deuteronomy give different accounts of where Aaron was, died and was buried? If we know how Deuteronomy works, then there's no conflict here whatsoever. How does Deuteronomy work? Come on, we know this. Deuteronomy is from the viewpoint of Moses. And we've seen this time and time again. We're going into Parashat Dvarim next week, or this coming Shabbat, actually. So, what did Moses see right over here? If you read several places in the Midrash, it says that the children of Israel missed Aaron so much that they came and they went 7 different times because they had trouble believing that he passed on. In other words, because it says their journeys and it says 7 different journeys. So they went to a place, but then they went back to Ho-ha-ha. They went there and they went back. They went there, they went back 7 times. So remember, where we read that God showed Aaron's coffin to all of Israel. Remember that? Okay. Now, turns out not only was it Aaron's coffin, but the entire mountain of Hol was hovering with Israel for 7 more of their stops until they reached Mosera, which is where it finally departed, and there they believed that it was all over. Very cool stuff. In other words, finally, once they got to Mosera, they let Aaron go. They're like, okay, Aaron has died. So in other words, he died in Ho-ha-ha, but now Ho-ha-ha is following us over there because we couldn't let him go. Until we got to Musa, we realized, okay, he's not coming back. And that's where officially he died in the eyes of the people. See that? Okay, very cool. So Rabbi Yossi said, from whom do we learn of the 7 days of mourning? From Jacob our father, for thus did his son Joseph unto him, as it is said in Genesis 50:10, and they came to the threshing floor of the thorn bushes, which is on the other side of the Jordan, and there they conducted a very great and impressive eulogy, and he made for his father a mourning of 7 days. And all the great kings went up with him, as it was written in verse 9, and chariots and horsemen also went up with him, and the camp was very numerous. What does the book of Jasher say over here? Just so you understand how numerous the camp was and who they consisted of. And after the days of his weeping had passed away, at the end of 70 days, Joseph said unto Pharaoh, I will go up and bury my father in the land of Canaan, as he made me swear, and then I will return. So again, they did not sit Shiva yet because Jacob was not buried in the land of Canaan, in Me'arat HaMachpelah. So they lamented for him for 70 days. 70 is synonymous with Jacob, Shiv'im Nefesh, right? Anyway, and Pharaoh sent Joseph, saying, go up and bury thy father, as he said, and as he made you swear. And Joseph rose up with all his brethren to go to the land of Canaan to bury their father Jacob, as he had commanded them. And Pharaoh commanded that it should be proclaimed throughout Egypt, saying, listen up, whoever, Pharaoh said this, whoever does not go up with Joseph and his brethren to the land of Canaan to bury Jacob shall die. And all Egypt heard of Pharaoh's proclamation, and they all rose up together, and all the servants of Pharaoh and the elders of his house and all the elders of the land of Egypt went up with Joseph, and all the officers and nobles of Pharaoh went up and servants of Joseph, and they went to bury Jacob in the land of Canaan. Maybe they had a skeleton crew, maybe there was nobody left there. Who knows? Nevertheless, this is what's up. Skipping forward, okay, now over all the incredible drama and action that took place right over there, we'll read the last 3 verses of the chapter. And Jacob was buried in Hebron, in the cave of Machpelah, which Abraham had bought from the sons of Het for the possession of a burial place, and he was buried in very costly garments. And no king had such honor paid him as Joseph paid unto his father at his death, for he buried him with great honor, like unto the burial of kings. And Joseph and his brethren made a mourning of 7 days for their father. Right there. Well, right there. Right there. So why is it important that I brought up all the fact that all of Egypt went to pay their respects to Jacob? We continue in our text. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to them, since you have done, to them meaning to Egypt, since you have done hesed to my servant Jacob, so too will I give you and your children a good reward in this world. So we see that in this case, it was more so to honor Jacob than to console Joseph, right? The dead receive more honor. Let's say, someone passed away, could be a friend of yours, relative or something like that. So you're going to console your friends, but the majority of the mitzvah actually goes to the person that passed, because again, that is the epitome of loving kindness, because the dead cannot repay you. So all of this was for the sake, and God recognizes it as not a kindness to Joseph, which out of respect for Joseph, of course, but primarily for Jacob. Secondly, if Pharaoh wouldn't have threatened to kill every last one of them, they would not have escorted Jacob's body to the land of Canaan, and yet still under duress, listen to me now, because this goes for Jews and Gentiles, under duress, the penalty of death, God indeed paid them back. In other words, if they would not have gone, they would have died, but because they went, even if their arm was, gun to your head, you still get the mitzvah for it. How so? From that point until Moses showed up on the scene 198 years later, the Egyptians all lived like kings. 188 years later. 210 minus 17. I'm so bad with math, I apologize. 210 minus 17, and that's how many years later he showed up. Okay, because Jacob lived for 17 years. I didn't know where you're going. The Egyptians all lived like kings, thanks to God placing Joseph on the throne. In other words, I will repay you back in this life. As we said, he ruled for 40 years as Pharaoh. Are you thinking right now? It's 193, right? Okay, because I can't, right? 10. I need my, yes. Okay, fine. As we said, he ruled for 40 years as Pharaoh's second. And after Pharaoh died, he ruled 40 years as the number one. After Joseph and the brothers died, Egypt slowly robbed the children of Israel of all their wealth, continuing to live good, comfortable lives. But that's still not all. Again, they're still coasting on the merit of what they did with Jacob. When the Egyptians died at the sea, although they all drowned, not as in PDE, not a single corpse was left in the water, nor did any of the fish eat them, as they were all sprawled up on the shore, thereby having the merit to be buried, as written in Exodus 15:12, you inclined your right hand, the earth swallowed them up. And what is God's right hand if not the hand of mercy? Judgment, mercy. And all this was done because their forefathers honored Jacob. Amazing. No one, no angel or man, nothing can ever come before God and dare to say that he is not perfectly just and merciful. Only God can be perfectly just and perfectly merciful. It can't work on human standards because, again, outside of space and time, it's a good thing. Where do we learn the duty of showing loving kindness to mourners? From Jezebel. What? That's right. There was only one of her and plenty, who emulate her. Nevertheless, we can learn from everyone, like we have seen time and time again. Her house was near to the marketplace. We can see this in 2 Kings 9:30. And Jehu came to Jezreel, and Jezebel heard, and she painted her eyes, and she adorned her head, and looked out of the window. These kind of women, they're always looking for the next dude. Her window was overlooking the marketplace, which back in those days was placed at the gates of the city and not in the center, like you would think today, because the marketplace was also for passers-by. Now, if you're not familiar with Jezebel, she was the absolute worst. A heathen, idolatrous witch, Ahab's widow, whose power of persuasion was in her tongue, as she would whisper poison to the ears of men, causing them to fall. She caused the deaths of many in Israel, including the death of her husband Ahab, who was, the most wicked king in Israel, but also he lost his kingdom, and she even tried to kill Elijah after the Mount Carmel incident. Anyway, even she did some good in her life, and we will learn from that as well. Every bridegroom that would come through the gates, she would leave her home and clap her hands and you see those before. Right, okay, yeah. With her mouth and escort them 10 paces, all the bridegrooms. Now, when it says the bridegroom, it actually means the bride and the groom, meaning they're just married, walking there together. And the greater mitzvah is to in Hebrew, in Israel, it's called kululu. Do taseh kululu, kululu, right? Okay, fine, you get it. I'm done with that. Thank you. So to kululu before the bride and escort them from the front. In other words, you're leading them, leading the way to clear the path. She did that. Jezebel did that. And not only that, when the dead would be carried through the marketplace, she would leave her home and clap her hands in despair and moan with her mouth, and would escort the dead. So, ay, 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 kulululu, ay, 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 right? It's a, okay. So let's quickly read from 2 Kings 9:30 to 36, how she died and what happened to her, okay? Because we're going to be discussing this a little bit, so I just want to give you some context. And Jehu came to Jezreel, and Jezebel heard, and she painted her eyes, and she adorned her head, and looked out of the window. And Jehu came into the gate, and she said, "Is there peace, Zimri, assassin of his master?" And he lifted his face to the window and said, "Who is with me? Who?" And 2 or 3 eunuchs looked out to him, meaning from there. And he said, "Push her out." And they pushed her out, and some of her blood splattered on the wall and on the horses, and they trampled her. And he came and ate and drank, not her, a local tavern or something. And he said, "Attend to this cursed woman and bury her, for she is a king's daughter." And they went to bury her, but they did not find of her, meaning they didn't find her body except for her skull, her feet. But feet, it says raglaim. Raglaim, kapot raglaim is actually, that's a feet. So meaning her legs and the palms of her hands. That's all they found. And they returned and told him, and he said, "It is God's word which he spoke through his prophet Elijah, the Tishbite, Eliyahu Tishbi, saying, in the territory of Jezreel, the dogs will devour Jezebel's flesh." That's a prophecy right there. So this evil witch got pushed out the window, got bloodied on the way down, went splat on the ground, got trampled on by horses, and almost her entire body, minus her head, hands, and her legs, were eaten by dogs. And still, what wasn't, got buried. Keep that in mind. Of her Elijah prophesied in the last verse of the chapter, "And Jezebel's corpse shall be as dung upon the field in the territory of Jezreel, so that no one will say, 'This is Jezebel.'" Look how God repays good for good, even to something as evil and manipulative and wicked as that. The limbs which had shown hesed, the actual limbs which had shown hesed, loving kindness, were not given over to the dogs. When I say everything counts, everything counts. So when they went to bury her, all they found was her head because she cheered or she moaned. They found her hands for clapping, and they found her legs for escorting. It's important to note that she didn't only use her mouth, but she was shaking, lifting and lowering her head, which is why the entire skull was spared. Otherwise, it'll be, her tongue or her throat, whatever. Well, maybe not the tongue, but whatever. You know what I'm saying. Her feet included all her legs because, well, you need them to walk. But as for her hands, our sages was very specific, saying that it was only the hands and not the arms. Again, the same thing. Think about it like this. When I put on tefillin in the morning, I use my right hand to put tefillin on my left hand. So I'm using this hand for good. Fellers, don't use this hand for bad. Y'all saying? Okay. Remember, because then all our body parts will be judged. Yes. Okay. Whence do we learn the duty of showing loving kindness to mourners? From the men of Yavesh Gilad. This was during the days of King Saul. When Saul and his sons were killed, the men of Yavesh Gilad said, "The man who saved us from the shame of the sons of Ammon, should we not reciprocate with loving kindness?" So what happened here? Let's take a read through 1 Chronicles chapter 10 for some context of what we're going to be learning about. "And the Philistines fought with Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines, and they fell slain on Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines pursued closely after Saul and his sons. And the Philistines smote Jonathan and Aminadav and Malchishua, the sons of Saul. And the battle bore heavily on Saul, and the archers discovered him, and he was terrified of the archers. And Saul said to his weapon bearer, 'Draw your sword and pierce me with it, lest these uncircumcised ones come upon me and make a mockery of me.' But his weapon bearer was unwilling. He's like, 'No, I can't.' for he feared greatly, and Saul took his sword, and Saul fell upon his sword. And his weapon bearer saw that Saul had died, and he too fell upon his sword and died. Or actually, the sword. Maybe it was the same sword. And Saul and his 3 sons died, and the entire household together died. All of Saul's household was ended right there. And all the men of Israel who were in the valley saw that they fled, and that Saul and his sons had died. And they abandoned their cities and fled, and the Philistines came and settled them. And it came about on the morrow, next day, that the Philistines came to strip the slain, and they found Saul and his sons lying on Mount Gilboa. And they stripped him and carried off his head and his weapons, and they sent throughout the land of the Philistines all around to bring the news to the priests of their idols and to the people. And they deposited his weapons in the temple of their gods, and his skull they impaled in the temple of Dagon. And all of Yavesh Gilad, here, the men of Yavesh Gilad, right? And here, all of Yavesh Gilad heard all the Philistines had done to Saul. And all the valiant men arose and carried off Saul's body and the bodies of his sons and brought them to Yavesh. And they buried their bones beneath the oak in Yavesh, and they fasted 7 days. And Saul died because of the treachery that he had committed against the Lord, concerning the word of the Lord that he did not keep, and also because he had inquired of the dead spirit. Remember, Saul was supposed to wipe out Amalek. Amalek, which we still struggle and suffer from today, Saul was tasked with taking them out. God said, every man, woman, and child, every goat, sheep, cow, whatever, dead, everything gone. It's written in the Torah what's going to happen, right? So why did he not do it? Pressure from the people. So he saved the king. I mean, he didn't save the king. He put the king in a dungeon, right? But he brought in the king. And why not give the people the spoils? The people want it. And Samuel went nuts, said, you have no idea what you did. Samuel then took a sword, and he cut the dude from basically like that, killing him, not before they sent a servant girl to him. He impregnated her in prison before he died, and she continued the seed of Amalek. In any case, that's why Saul lost his kingdom. But why he died like this is because he raised the dead. I think we discussed it even. He raised Samuel. With Samuel, Moses came. You can actually see it in the language. It was more than one person over there. In any case, so that's obviously a big no-no. You're not allowed to do that. And he did not inquire of the Lord, and he slew him and transferred the kingdom to David, the son of Jesse. So again, back to our text. When Saul and his sons were killed, the men of Yavesh Gilad said, the man who saved us from the shame of the sons of Ammon, should we not reciprocate with loving kindness? Should we not ligmol lo hesed? Their mighty men rose up together, and all throughout the night they went to Chomat Beit Shean, just like we read, from where they were at that point, from where they heard Yavesh Gilad. It was a 3-hour march to where they needed to go. And it was said that the news of Saul and that Saul fell and his body was mutilated and his head decapitated and everything, and it only reached them after dark. So in other words, that night they did it. They didn't even delay. This was essentially a retrieval operation, obviously, because there was no life to rescue. These men put their lives on the line, for the honor of their fallen king, that he should be buried. And not necessarily their fallen king, but still the guy who gave them hesed, that he should be buried. So they went all the way into the enemy camp undetected and retrieved the body and head of King Saul. Now, when it says they're mighty men, in other places, let's say a man of valor, David was a man of valor, Boaz was a man of valor. These were not necessarily men of valor in the spiritual sense, but rather in the physical sense. They were straight up warriors. But when you say David is a man of valor, in the physical and spiritual sense. Okay. The mourners are consoled with bread and wine, as written in Proverbs 31:6. Give strong drink to the one who is perishing, and wine to those of bitter soul. Mourners. The Radal says that the wine was created for the sake of comforting the avelim, the mourners. You hear that? Wine was created to comfort the mourners. The men of Yavesh Gilad showed loving kindness or hesed to Shaul and his sons. How did they do this? By risking their lives to get his body back? No. By making sure that he had a proper burial? I mean, what does the text say? Through fasting, weeping, and lamenting, as it said, and they fasted 7 days. Okay, so hold on now. Let's all understand something. They went on this insanely dangerous night mission, could have been suicide mission, within the camp of the Philistines, mortal enemies, that if they would have been caught, God forbid, they would have been tortured, mutilated, and possibly even sacrificed to foreign gods or worse. Who knows? And that did not count as chesed. How about this? What they did for Saul was the least they could have done after what he did for them. Meaning they paid back, right? And what did he do for them? Let's read 1 Samuel, 1 Samuel 11. We're not in a rush, right? Let's learn some Torah. And Nachash the Ammonite, from Ammon, right? And Nachash the Ammonite went up and camped against Yavesh Gilad. And all the people of Yavesh Gilad said to Nachash, make a treaty with us, and we shall serve you. And Nachash the Ammonite said to them, on this condition I will make a treaty with you by gouging out the right eye of every one of you, and I shall make it a reproach against all of Israel. And the elders of Yavesh said to him, give us 7 days respite, that we may send messengers throughout the entire border of Israel, and if there is no one to save us, we shall come out to you. And the messengers came to Givat Shaul, the mountain or the hill of Saul, and spoke the words in the ears of the people. And the people raised their voice and cried. And behold, Saul came after the cattle from the field, and Saul said, what is troubling the people, that they cry? And they told him the words of the people of Yavesh. And the Spirit of God passed over Saul when he heard these words, and his wrath was kindled greatly. Just so you understand right now, because at this point he was in a righteous state, the Spirit of God came over him. Other religions, you think it lives within, that's not what it does at all. Nowhere in the Torah do we see this other than Moses himself. That's it. And let's say if a person does something, falls or snaps or gets angry and so on in a negative way, it's because a different spirit comes over you. All these things come from either above or below. Well, they all come from above, but you understand the point of what I'm saying. It depends where you are. That's why people who are in a good place tend to not get angry. And if they do, it's for the right reasons. In other words, this definitely came from God, and we will see. And he took a yoke of oxen and cut them in pieces and sent them throughout the entire border of Israel in the hand of the messengers, saying, whoever does not go forth after Saul and after Samuel, so shall be done to them like this ox. And a fear from the Lord fell upon the people, and they went forth as one man, ke'ish echad. Amazing. When Israel goes forth as one man, ooh, look out. I mean, in a good way. And he counted them in Bezek, Babazik, Vaifkadem Bebazik, in the Bazek. And the children of Israel were 300,000, and the men of Judah 30,000. Okay, so all of Israel were 330 with Judah. And they said to the messengers who had come, so shall you say to the people of Yavesh Gilad, tomorrow by the time the sun is hot, meaning midday, you will have deliverance. And the messengers came and told the people of Yavesh, and they rejoiced. And the people of Yavesh said, tomorrow we shall come out to you, and you may do to all of us that is good in your eyes, right? And it was on the morrow that Saul put the people into 3 contingents, and they came into the midst of the camp during the morning watch, and they smote the Ammonites until the heat of the day. And it was that those remaining scattered, and no 2 of them remained together. In other words, if they scattered, they were just single dudes running everywhere. That's it. And the people said to Samuel, whosoever says Saul will reign over us, give over the people and let us put them to death. And Saul said, no man shall be put to death on this day, for today the Lord has brought deliverance in Israel. And Samuel said, to the people, come and let us go to Gilead, or the Gilgal, excuse me. Come, let us go, Nelecha la Gilgal, and renew there the kingdom. And all the people went to Gilgal, and there they made Saul king before the Lord in Gilgal, and there they slaughtered peace offerings before the Lord, and Saul and all the people rejoiced greatly. Okay. Do you see now why retrieving his head and body was not hesed? That was the least they could have done. They paid him back. That was reciprocation for having saved their lives to begin with. So what is chesed? Again, when you go above and beyond, that is chesed, right? It's like if I do a job and you pay me my money, are you doing chesed with me? No. Which is why it says that it was done through fasting, weeping, and lamenting. That was the above and beyond. They didn't have to do that, but they did. Now let me give you an example, okay? Practical example. There's a person who needs income, okay? The poor among you. Person needs income. So you have a company. You can afford to give them a job, right? You give them a job. They do work for you. You pay them their fair wages. Is that chesed? No, it is not. You work, you get paid. That's it. So, this is a direct command from the 5 books of Moses. Deuteronomy 24:45. You shall not withhold the wages of a poor or destitute hired worker, of your brothers or of your strangers who are in your land within your cities. You shall give him his wages on his day, and not let the sun set over it. For he is poor and he risks his life for it, so that he should not cry out to the Lord against you, so there should be no sin upon you. You have to understand, the poor and the destitute, those are the ones that have God's ear. Why? Because God put them there to test you. How are you going to treat them? You see. So what would be chesed in a situation like this? If the employer pays the employee extra wages within the wages. In other words, if you're working on a salary of, 2-3K a month, I'll give you 4, 5, whatever. I don't know. Or here's a car. You understand what I'm saying? Thereby, not to embarrass his brother in time of need, and also giving him an opportunity to get back on his feet. It's very, very important. That is chesed. Chesed goes above and beyond. The men of Yavesh Gilad owed Saul their lives. Since his death, the least they could do was make sure that he had a proper burial. And on top of that, fasting, weeping, and lamenting. Okay? Very cool. It's good stuff. So now that we know these things, again, we have to pay attention in our lives. Are we doing enough chesed? How are we doing it? These are good day-to-day things that we should learn. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to them, I will pay you your wages in the times to come. Why in the times to come? Why do they not get their wages in this life, in the here and in the now? Because the mitzvot of the righteous, especially when it comes to doing chesed, you are attaching yourself to the eternal who is chesed. The wicked, if they do something good, they get paid in this life. The righteous in the world to come. And this reward is greater than anything physical they could have received in their lifetime anyway. So yeah, pay me when it really actually counts. To understand the stories even better, just really Google the division of the land according to the tribes. Okay, if the tribes of Israel back in the day, and you'll see. You'll see where Gilad is and where Ammon are, and they're both in the halves of the tribe of Manasseh on the east side of the Jordan. And this is also important to note. The tribe of Gad are also included in the first tribe to be called, as they also border the half tribe of Manasseh on the east side, right beneath them of the Jordan. In other words, you got the Jordan, you got the tribe. It's backwards for you now. But you have the Jordan, you have Manasseh, beneath it you have the tribe of Gad. Meaning that they're also part of Yavesh Gilad. And more importantly, although they chose their plot first among the tribes, this was Gad, they were the last tribe to actually settle, because they vowed that they would not rest until every last tribe was settled into the land. They went and they battled until all of Israel was done. Then they went back and they sat there. And why did they specifically choose that plot? This is to the merit of the tribe of Gad, because that's where Moses was buried. And they wanted to protect the vicinity from anyone who would even attempt to come near that site. The Ammonites were right to the east of them. You'll see on your Google Maps over there. none of which is forgotten. So, what is God going to do? While I will gather all of Israel, here's how God is going to pay back. Listen, because you could be very well part of these tribes. 10 lost tribes. If you're Gad, Menashe, maybe Reuben, what's going on over here? While I will gather all the tribes from the four corners of the earth, the first among them I will gather the half tribe of Menashe on the eastern side of the Jordan. Again, they're not sitting there now. Everybody's messed up all over the world. But again, the people will be coming back. The first ones to come back. As written in Psalm 60, verse 9, Gilead is mine, and Menashe is mine, and Ephraim is the strength of my head. Judah is my lawgiver. Okay, so let's break this down. First, Gilad and Menashe, and after Ephraim and Judah. So we see four. Who's Gilad? This is Ahab, who died in Ramoth Gilad. Menashe, not the tribe, but the king of Judah, Hezekiah's son. He was bad news. Ephraim, this is Yerovam ben Avat. We learned about him in the last series. And Judah, this is Achitopel, a good and wise man, advisor to King David. Now, let's read the following verse in Psalm 60. That would be verse 10. Moab is my wash basin. On Edom I will throw my lock. Philistia, Plashet in Hebrew it says, raise your voice to me. Hitru'ai. Now, I don't know what your translation says, but this isn't lock, but rather my shoe. Listen to it. Moav, sir rachatzi. Sir is a pot, so lilchotz, to wash basin. Al Edom ashlich na'ali. Na'al is a shoe, right? But man'ul is a lock. We discussed this also. So, I mean, again, this is, I copy and paste off the Chabad website only because it's laid out nicely with the Hebrew and the English, but even they don't get 100% right all the time. So again, na'al and man'ul, they have the same roots as your na'al, your shoe, keeps you na'ul, locked in to this world, which is why Moses was told to remove his na'alaim, remove your shoes, both of them, because I need you completely detached from this world for where you're about to go, right? Joshua, just one. I need you here and I need you there. So the temple services, barefoot, right? Outer worldly. Moab, my wash basin. This is Gachzi, who was healed from leprosy by Elisha. And Edom, I will throw my shoe. This is Doeg, the Edomite. He killed 85 priests of Israel from the family who helped David as he was fleeing from Saul. The family of the priests that they helped David, so he slayed 85 priests of Israel. So on the one hand, he killed Kohanim, but on the other hand, he was listening to the Lord's anointed, which was Saul. He listened to the king of Israel, which means he gets a shoe thrown at him in the positive sense because God pays everyone what they are due. Philistia, raise your voice to me. These are the Philistines who got who got their uncircumcised behinds handed to them time and again by David. The ministering angels ask God, after everything that they have been through, they cry out to you, and how is it that you repay them? God said, I will give them peace amongst themselves in this world. Nothing in the world to come, but in this world. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, עליי לפלש להם זכות ולעשותם רעים אלו ואלו. Re'im are fellows, comrades. So the Philistines never really fought amongst themselves. Rabbi Pinchas says, after 1 year that Saul and his sons were killed, there was a 3-year famine. Okay, so we're done with this topic. Rabbi Pinchas says, after 1 year that Saul and his sons were killed, there was a 3-year famine in the land during the days of King David. The commentators agree that there must have been a confusion in the actual copy of Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer because we read the timeline that it happened 30 years after they died. So 30 years after Saul and his sons died, there was a 3-year famine in the land during David's reign. 1 year after the next, as the text says, and we can see this in 2 Samuel 21:11. And there was a famine in the days of David for 3 years, year after year. Vayhi rav b'imei David 3 shanim, shana achrei shana. So there's no confusion. And David sought the face of the Lord, and the Lord said, okay. Anyway, in this next part, this next part is fascinating, as you will see David acting as a spiritual physician to practical problems. Now, I know what it actually says in this verse, but we're going now into the Midrash and we're breaking it down, what happened in between. Like we said, the book of Jasher is Midrash, so you could be reading one verse in the Torah, in the 5 books, but it'll be pages upon pages in Jasher and you'll see, oh, all this happened in between. Wow, so one verse could be a few months, a few weeks, a day, a few hours, maybe a few years. Okay, so backstory. In the first year, all of Israel went up to Jerusalem to celebrate the great festivals, right? The 3 aliyot laregel, as we're commanded to do 3 times a year, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. David said to them, go look and see if perchance, and they're like, okay, listen, there's hunger. What are we doing? David said, go look and see if perchance there be among you someone who worships idols, for because of the sin of idolatry, rain is withheld. As it is said, take heed to yourselves, lest your heart be deceived, and turn aside and serve other gods. Right? And serve other gods and worship them. In Deuteronomy 11:16, this is in the Shema. What is written after this? And the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you, and he will shut up the heaven, that there be no rain. V'atzar et hashamayim v'lo yeh matar, God said. Deuteronomy 11:17. In other words, for idolatry, there's not going to be rain. So we say this 3 times a day. We say this in the Shema. We say in Shacharit, in Arvit, and before we go to sleep. This is very, very important to know. They went forth and investigated, but did not find any idolatry. First of all, that's amazing. There is no idolatry in Israel during the time of King David. Unbelievable. When we go to the doctor and we have some sort of pain somewhere, sorry for being vague, but you'll get the point, right? You have ailments somewhere, go to the doctor, this hurts, that hurts. The doctor, being highly educated in human anatomy, will immediately see all the possibilities that can potentially cause these ailments, unless it's obvious. I broke my bone here, so, you get what I'm saying, okay? Something internal, something that's causing whatever outcome. I can't think of anything, but you get it. Okay, so one by one, through the process of elimination, they will begin to diagnose the cause of our ailments so they can properly treat us. First, you need a diagnosis, right? Okay, this, we're going to do treatment for that. Doesn't work? Treatment for the next, and for the next, for the next, until finally the treatment that we gave for one of the specific options works. That's how the doctor knows, okay, well, clearly that this is the cause of the problem, right? So the first attempt by David, it didn't do the trick. As he opened up the book of medicine and went through the symptoms, meaning the Torah, right? What causes the stoppage of rain? Idolatry, right there, it says in Deuteronomy. Okay, so it wasn't that. In the second year, all of Israel went up to celebrate the festivals. David said to them, go forth and see if there be among you people who lead immoral lives, sexual immorality, right? Because owing to the sin of immorality, the heavens are closed, as it is said, and thou hast polluted the land with thy whoredoms. Jeremiah 3:2. What is written after this in the context? Therefore the showers have been withholden, and there hath been no latter rain. Jeremiah 3:3. They investigated, but they did not find any immoral people. What? No sexual immorality during the days of David? That's amazing. Now, naturally, David tried again to find the source and the root cause of the lack of the rain from the Torah, as it was not the reason. And yes, I'm aware that Jeremiah came way after David. Nevertheless, these laws have been already given to Moses on Mount Sinai. We're talking about sexual immorality. It says that they're in the Torah. Jeremiah just repeats them because this was the sin of his generation, and that is specifically why God withheld the rain. In the third year, Israel all went up to celebrate the festivals. David said to them, go forth and see if there be among you people who shed blood. Because on account of the sin of those who murder, the rain is withheld. Now, shedding blood in the Torah is, actually, I'm doing this, but it's 3 things. Lashon hara, you speak ill of a person, you basically kill them while they're still alive. That is likened to murder. The other thing, spilling seed. Could have been a baby, could have been a life, murder, and, well, straight up murder. Okay, so those 3 things. Because on account of the sin of those who murder, the rain is withheld, it is said, so ye shall not pollute the land wherein you are, for blood it polluteth the land. Numbers 35:33. They went forth and investigated, but they did not find any murder. Amazing. Okay, so we see that Israel during the time of David were, wow, they were all righteous. They were all tzaddikim. Look at this. This is unbelievable. And David as king was responsible for their actions. David said to them, henceforth the matter only depends upon me. In other words, you guys are good. We did our due diligence. It's on me. What do you do? What do you do if, okay, you exhaust all the options? David arose and prayed before the Holy and Blessed be He. As you can see, all this was in the same verse in Samuel right there. But look what happened in between. 3 years in one verse. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, why didn't David start by praying to the Lord? If there's no rain, oh, Lord, why is there no rain? Or why didn't David look to himself first? I will answer your questions. David acted in perfect accordance with being a Torah scholar. That is what David did. David was known to any moment that he wasn't out slaying Philistines. He was sitting and he was reading the 5 books of Moses and writing Psalms. That was David. We do not bother God if we first don't try to solve things ourselves. How many times? Dad, I can't find a thing. Did you look? Yeah. If I come and if I find it, you're going to get in trouble. And then you look harder and then you find whatever you need to find, or so on and so forth, right? You get that. You don't bother God when He gave you all the answers in the Torah. Did God not give us the Torah to find these answers? What causes the heavens to stop? A, B, C. Okay, so we're going to try everything first. Does God not give us the remedy before the blow? Yes, He does. Did we not discuss last week, I believe, that any question we may have already has the answer in the Torah? Yes, we did. How much more so during David's time as the Tanakh was being written? So David knew that the cause of no rain were, and he knew what they were, and he addressed them all. First, among the people. Why? Because the people are all responsible. And when they were found guiltless, he realized that it was something that he himself needed to do. Again, it's enough for one person from Israel to cause all of Israel to fall. We've seen this with Achan and Joshua in the story with he took the gold, right? All of Israel fell because of one man. But then again, it can only take one man to lift up all of Israel. No other nation is like this. So again, why did he not check with himself first? Because he absolutely knew that he was not an idolater, nor did he engage in sexual immorality, nor was he a murderer. Okay, only once all his options have been removed did he turn to God. And he answered him. God answered David, it is for Saul. Was not Saul one who was anointed with the oil of consecration? This is God telling David that this is because of Saul. And was it not Saul in whose days there was no idolatry in Israel? Amazing. And was it not Saul who secured his portion with Samuel the prophet? Yet you are in the land of Israel, says God to David, and he is buried outside the land of Israel. Where is he buried? In Yavesh Gilad, on the eastern side of the Jordan. What? Even if Saul fell in the end, and yes, he totally screwed up, he was still the Lord's anointed. God said he's the first king of Israel. Which is also why David would not dare lay a finger on him, because of that reason. When he cut off his cloak, a piece of his cloak, his cape, he says, I could have killed you, but I don't want to do this, so please stop pursuing me. I don't want to kill you. And they kept on asking him, why don't you kill him? You can just end this right now. He goes, I'm not, are you crazy? He's the Lord's anointed. Good or bad, I cannot touch him. And yes, David was also the Lord's anointed, but David was not crowned king. Saul was. David knew his place. So important, so humble, so beautiful. So, we just read that the men of Yavesh Gilad got his body back from the enemy, but they still did not bury him within the borders of Israel. David immediately rose and gathered together all the elders of Israel and the nobles, and they crossed the Jordan. They came to Yavesh Gilad, and they found the bones of Saul and Jonathan his son. No worm had been able to touch them, as it is said, he keeps all his bones, not one of them is broken. Psalms 34:20. That was for the sake of Saul. God was preserving them until they are buried where they need to be buried, where they can go back to the land. They took the bones of Saul and Jonathan his son and placed them in a coffin, and they crossed the Jordan, as it is said, and they buried the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan, and they performed all that the king had commanded, 2 Samuel 21:14. The king commanded that they should bring the coffin of Saul in all the borders of each tribe. Everyone's got to see this. Behold, this what he was the king of Israel. And it came to pass that the tribe wherein they brought the coffin of Saul, the people there, with their wives and their sons and their daughters, came forth and displayed loving kindness to Saul and to his sons, so that all of Israel should discharge their obligation of showing loving kindness. This is an opportunity for all of Israel. It elevated all of Israel and did right by King Saul and Jonathan. The first king of Israel still deserves honor and respect, especially after he paid for his sins with his life and after his death. And this should not diminish all the good that he did while he reigned. Still, respect King Saul, first king of Israel. And thus did they do, until it came to the border of his possession, to the border of Israel, and the land of Benjamin in Jerusalem. And it is said, and they buried the bones of Saul and Jonathan his son in the country of Benjamin. When the Holy One, blessed be he, saw that all Israel has displayed loving kindness to him, he was forthwith full of compassion, and he sent rain upon the land, as it is said, and after that God was entreated for the land. I know I studied this, I know I wrote this, and I'm getting emotional now when I read this. Baruch Hashem, seriously, is God not so awesome? He's so awesome. I'm going to start to cry. Continue. Okay. We can equate bodily pain and discomfort to biblical punishments in the sense that they're warning signs that something is wrong, right? If something's wrong with our lives, okay, what's going on? An adjustment needs to be made. If you have pain, if you have no pain telling you to seek medical attention, you could very well be dead. I saw this, one of these hospital shows a while back, and what was it? There was this woman that didn't feel pain, and she cut herself, and she almost died because she just bled out. She was in the hospital bed, and she didn't feel. Again, if the pain is there, it's like, ow, why am I feeling pain? To warn you that something is going on, right? So spiritually speaking, again, currently we are in the times of the Geulah right now, and we are going through Chavalei Mashiach. So when things get tough, it's not to tell you that God is being mean to you. It's to tell you that we are in a certain time, and then you have to know the times and the place and what it is and how to handle it. All these are warning signs for our benefit, you see? Rain, Saul, ground, Baruch Hashem, okay. If Israel did not inquire of King David, who is, their king, and later, after we see the proper steps that David inquired of the Lord, the people would have starved. No food, no rain back then meant death. You got a famine, you're starting eating your reserves until there's nothing left. Our sages over the course of 2,000 years were so holy and righteous that if trouble would befall them, they would immediately investigate their actions, their daily habits, anything they might have done differently, anything out of the ordinary. I'm not talking about during the times of the Romans and the persecution, all that stuff. They knew that all that stuff was coming. They knew it. They knew why this had to happen. I'm talking about in individual cases throughout their lives. Did they do something or did they not do enough of something? Was it easier for them to find a flaw? It was actually easier for them to find a flaw because they were on such a high level. In other words, what's the one thing that I did that's out of place? It's usually like one thing, right? And as being on such a high level, they would have severe corrections for what would seem to us as something small. Take Israel, for instance, okay? Israel in the wilderness, 40 years. How could it be that they did something, they complained to God, God, come on, why are you messing with me? We want water or we want meat. Immediately, they get struck with the plague, right? What? Think about how everybody's living today, right? We should have been dead infinitely times over. There's no way. What's the difference? The Shekhinah was dwelling amongst them. So the moment you do something wrong, boom, you get a correction right there. Right now, the Shekhinah is hidden, and we know this. That's why all hell is breaking loose. Literally. So, that's why the correction comes in the end. Don't wait for the correction. Do tshuva now. Today. Just say yes. Okay, so in the Talmud, almost all the sages went through some sort of affliction or something for the sake of learning something for our benefit. Okay, and everything is recorded. So I'm going to give you an example of Rabbi Judah Nasi. I learned this story when I was a kid, and it's in Baba Metzia 85a. Who is Rabbi Judah Nasi? He's the man that saved the Torah by writing down the oral law. He wrote down the Mishnah. Okay, the Gemara states that Rabbi Judah Nasi's suffering came from, and later I'll tell you what suffering is. Suffering came upon him due to an incident. He suffered, meaning he suffered from one thing due to one thing that he did. What was the incident that led to his suffering? The Gemara answers that there was a certain calf that was being led to slaughter, as calves are. Sorry for all the vegans out there. This is okay. The calf went and hung its head on the corner of Rabbi Judah Nasi's garment and was weeping. I guess he was aware of what was going on over there at the time. Rabbi Judah Nasi said to it, "Go, as you were created for this purpose." It was said in heaven, "Since he was not compassionate towards the calf, let afflictions come upon him." What? Now again, he was absolutely right with what he said, but it was how he said it, or the feeling or the meaning that he had behind his words. Like, what are you mooing to me here? Get up on there and help make a tikkun olam. Right? The Gemara explains the statement and left him due to another incident, meaning in the end there was a correction. One day the maidservant of Rabbi Judah Nasi was sweeping the house. There were young weasels lying about, and she was in the process of sweeping them out. Rabbi Judah Nasi said to her, "Let them be, as it is written, the Lord is good to all, and his mercies are over all his works." Psalms 145:9. Tov Adonai Hakol v'rachamav al kol ma'asav. They said in heaven, "Since he was compassionate, we shall be compassionate on him," and he was relieved of his suffering. What was this affliction that Rabbi Judah Nasi had for many, many years, from the time where he dismissed the calf to the time where he showed mercy and kindness to the weasels? Hemorrhoids. That's right. Not comfortable, not fun, especially to such a righteous man who would sit and learn Torah all day long. Back to Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Nathanael said, 300 years before the birth of Josiah was his name mentioned, as it is said. Who's Josiah? Yoshiao. Was his name mentioned, as it said, "Behold, a child shall be born unto the house of David, Josiah by name." 1 Kings 13:2. And he was 8 years old when he began to reign. 2 Kings 22:1. What is the disposition of a lad that is 8 years of age? 8 years, okay? I mean, Solomon was anointed at age 12, but that was Solomon. What could an 8-year-old on the throne possibly do? Let me tell you, this kid was amazing, okay? 2 Chronicles 34. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 31 years, 31 short years. Remember, kings don't get dismissed. They only die. And he did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, and he walked in the ways of David his father. Now, obviously, David is not his father, but since he was from the line of David, his father. I could say Abraham, my father, so can you. You get it. And turned aside neither to the right nor to the left. And in the 8th year, when he became king, when he was still a youth, he started to seek after the God of David his father. David's the benchmark, yeah? And in the 12th year, he started to purge Judah and Jerusalem of the high places, and the Asherim, and the graven images, and the molten images. And they demolished before him the altars of the Baalim and the sun images that were above them. He cut down, and the Asherim, and the graven images, and the molten images, and he smashed and he crushed them, and he cast them upon the graves of those who had sacrificed to them. And the bones of the priests he burnt on their altars, and he purged Judah and Jerusalem, ridding everything of idolatry. And in the cities of Manasseh and Ephraim and Shimon, Simeon and Shimon, as far as Naphtali, with their instruments of destruction round about, to the north, to the south, and to the northeast. And he demolished the altars and the Asherim and the graven images, and he crushed them into dust. And all the sun images he cut down in all the land of Israel, and he returned to Jerusalem. So, yeah. And in the 18th year of his reign, so this he's doing, he's 8 years old, now he's 12 years old, now he's 18 years old, now in the 18th year of his reign. So he was 26, right? 18 and... Yes, I knew that. After the purging of the land and the temple, I have other talents, okay? He sent Shaphan ben Atzliahu, that's the name, Shaphan. Shaphan means bunny, just so you know, rabbit. He sent Shaphan, the son of Azaliah, and Maaseiah, the ruler of the city, and Yoach ben Yoachaz, who was the recorder, to strengthen the house of the Lord his God. Now this whole cleansing took 18 years, okay? Also, you see why the system of 4 years, you got now, the presidential system of 4 years plus another potential 4 years, is a system that is actually set up to fail, yes? They did this because no one can actually do enough to maintain and maintain for 4 years. So, yes, you have been set up to fail. This is the governing system of the world. We have it here in Israel too. So King Yoshiao despised the idols, broke the altars, and cut down the Asherah trees, smashed all the molten and graven images, all the statues and whatnot. It's not bad for a guy who was king when he was 8 years old. His merit was gleaning before the Holy and Blessed be He, and the throne of glory. Yoshiahu's deeds were likened to the sun, which is why the word that is used in Hebrew is mavheket, like mivahek. It's like a brightness that it's so bright, it's white, mavhek. Look at what it said of him in 2 Kings 23:25. Now before him there was no king like him, who returned to the Lord with all his heart and with all his soul and with all his possessions, according to the entire Torah of Moses, and after him no one arose. Amazing. Because of the evil that they, meaning the generation, did in secret, the righteous was taken. It says in Hebrew, Ne'esaf HaTzadik. Now this could be plural, but it could also be singular tense. So in other words, because of the sins of the generation, the righteous are taken, or the righteous is taken, are or is. It's within the same context here in Hebrew. And unfortunately for us, for Judah at the time, we were not worthy of such a king. And so at the young age of 39, Yoshiao was killed. All the people of Judah and Jerusalem and Jeremiah the prophet came to do hesed with Yoshiao, as said in 2 Chronicles 35:25. And Jeremiah lamented Josiah. Why is Yoshiao Josiah? Whatever. And all the male and female singers spoke of Josiah in their lamentations until this day, and they made them a statute over Israel. And behold, they are written in the Lamentations. Now, Rabbi Meir says the singers, who are the singers? It says all the and male and female singers. Vaymu kol ha-sharim v'ha-sharot. Sharim, the singers, and sharot, female singers. Okay. So he says the singers are the Levites who stand upon the stage with song. Okay. And the female singers, who are the female singers? They were their wives. Now, did the female singers sing at the temple? Of course not. The question is, why then are they called sharot, female singers? It's the same concept when calling a rabbi's wife Rebbitzin. So if rabbi, Rebbitzin. Fake rabbi, fake Rebbitzin. You get the idea. She does, she doesn't have smicha. Nevertheless, she shares that honor because she's the wife of. There's even a word for the wives of the priests, of the kohanim, and that is kohanot. Kohanot. It's very interesting. Rabbi Shimon says, this is not about the Levites and their wives, but rather this speaks of the wise women, as is said in Jeremiah 9:16. Thus says the Lord of hosts, consider and call for the hired women mourners, that they may come, and send for the skillful wise women, and let them come. It says, ve'ela chachamot. Chacham is wise. Send to the wise women that they should come. These, of course, are not limited to the wives of the Levites, but throughout the generations of the women who knew how to mourn and how to properly lament, and the relevant songs and what to say in every situation. Hence, the wise men instituted the rule that this should be done to all the wise men of Israel and to their great men, as it is said, and they made them an ordinance in Israel. 2 Chronicles 35:25, the verse we just read. When a great rabbi passes away, you have anywhere between 250,000 and 500,000 heads on average. The city of Jerusalem gets shut down. No one goes anywhere. In fact, a rabbi just passed away. What day is it today? A few days ago. So he wasn't, anyway, there were a few 100,000. Okay, anyway, let's continue. Solomon saw that the observance of loving kindness was before the Holy One, blessed be He. When he built the temple, he erected 2 gates, one for the bridegrooms and the other for the mourners and the excommunicated. Okay, this is in Jerusalem during the days of Solomon. On the Sabbaths, the Israelites went and sat between those 2 gates, and they knew that anyone who entered through the gate of the bridegrooms was a bridegroom. And they said to him, may he who dwells in this house cause thee to rejoice with sons and daughters. And if one entered through the gate of the mourners with his upper lip covered, I don't know what that is, but if it's bugging anybody, I'll look for a thing. It just says with his upper lip covered, then they knew that he was a mourner. And they would say to him, may he who dwells in the house comfort you. If one entered through the gate of the mourners without having his upper lip covered, then they knew that he was excommunicated, and they would say to him, may he who dwells in this house put into your heart the desire to listen to the words of your associates, and may he put into the hearts of your associates that they may draw you near to themselves, meaning let's make peace over here, so that all Israel may discharge their duty by rendering the service of loving kindness. Solomon realized that doing hesed to one another in Israel does good for each and every one of us. Therefore, for us as a collectively, good stuff. That's why he did this. So all of Israel should have this opportunity. You need to understand the significance of this setup. What did we learn last week? What are the 3 things by which the world stands? The Torah, the avodah, the prayer, right? And gemilut chasadim. That's this. Chesed, kindness, loving kindness. When a person gets married, or when a person dies, or when a person is excommunicated, this is God giving all of Israel the opportunity to partake in this mitzvah that makes the world go round. When God sends you a poor person and you give them a few shekels, I guarantee to you that the reciprocity to you from heaven is way greater than whatever you could have given that person. God created such a beautiful system that nothing goes to waste. Nothing. Everything has an opportunity for tikkun. When I say everything, I mean everything. Oh yes. As PDE says, from the time the temple was destroyed, it has been decreed that bridegrooms and mourners would go to the synagogues and the houses of study. The people of these places would see the groom and they would rejoice with him, and they would see the mourner and sit with him on the ground. This is in order that Israel should be able to discharge their obligation in the service of loving kindness. Now you can ask, well, how is it chesed if we are charged to do it? If it's a command, then how is it chesed? How is it going above and beyond if it is our obligation? Unless you haven't been paying attention to all of these teachings and the details by which God created all things, then surely you may be one who believes that you are owed something in this world, when in fact it is you who owes God everything. You are owed nothing. You must understand. You see, we're just the fact that you're born right now, everything is in a pay it forward system, and God has given us way more than we could ever give back to him. Now he knows this, and so do wise and learned people. So what does he do? He makes it a statute to give hesed to others. They are in fact one and the same. You see, you can't separate that. And the reason it's a statute is because the world still must stand up until the time of the end. And those who give chesed, the text says, And those who give chesed, it is said unto them, Blessed are you, Lord, who repays good wages to those who show chesed to others. In other words, it's all for our benefit. It's all for our own good. Which is why I can read in the Mishnah, Masechet Makot 3:16, Rabbi Hananya ben Akasha omer, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל, לפיכך הרבה להם תורה ומצוות, שנאמר, אדוני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיל תורה ויאדיר. Rabbi Hananya ben Akasha says, the Holy One, blessed be he, sought to confer merit upon Israel. Want to give Israel so much merit. Therefore, as a result, he increased for them Torah and mitzvah. You could do a mitzvah in any situation. There's always a situation for a mitzvah. Take a breath of fresh air, there could be a mitzvah. Go to the bathroom, there's a mitzvah. Eat whatever, there's a mitzvah. Sit down, learn Torah, there's a mitzvah. See a friend you haven't seen in a while, there's a mitzvah. See a beautiful bird, see the sky, see whatever. There's always a way to bless God. There's always a way to do kindness for another person. Lefichach, therefore he increased for them Torah and mitzvot. As each mitzvah increases our merit, as it is stated in Isaiah 42:21, it pleased the Lord for the sake of his righteousness to make the Torah great and glorious everywhere. God sought to make the Torah great and glorious by means of the proliferation of the mitzvot. As many as possible, as much as possible, everything goes glory to God. It's all for our benefit. And what we need to do is show a little gratitude. And right here in this class, we are shown ways to fulfill this obligatory command. And that's our class for today. And I think, so we'll say, and it was evening and it was morning, the sixth day. So stick around as next week we start to get into Shabbat. So thank you all for joining me. See you all next time, and Shabbat Shalom. Bye.